most people think of visual design first because it's what you see, right? But as Jake was saying, I think more importantly, it's also the functionality, what it does, and the interaction design that comes along with it. Really, what Alexis was sort of alluding to is sort of things have changed over time, and I think one of the biggest changes I've seen is the fact that apps are no longer siloed. You know, they work well with other apps. They play nicely with them. They're connected. You know, no longer is it the case where, you know, somebody who's using an app have to jump from app to app to app, maybe even to paper, you know, serving kind of like a manual glue holding their business process together. I think modern apps do a lot of that heavy lifting for them. At least they should.
Absolutely. And you know, I think a lot of the people who are in the audience share kind of my, you know, I like design. I can see something and say, well, this looks well designed, but I struggle with it in you know, in kind of creating those design, and it's even harder for me to explain to customers what good design is, right? And so my question, I guess, Alexis, you know, how do we communicate to customers that good design is actually valuable and it's worth the extra time, resources, right, and effort to bring about?
I'll jump in there. I think that you can almost always demonstrate some value, because obviously, you know, if design isn't valuable, then why do it, right? I mean, why do anything if it's not going to bring you value? Why invest the money? So I think, though, that there's really demonstrable, almost always a demonstrable case to be made for why design would be worth it. So you can often find something to measure, whether it's number of transactions that are going through the system in a year, or the amount of time people are spending reworking jobs that maybe have to be redone, or you know, different kinds of measurements like that. So something that you can measure, some sort of metric or you know, key indicator. And then you can say, well, you know, our design, by redesigning this process, we're going to be able to take all of this manual work that you're doing. You know, let's say you're proofing a long list of entries, you know, between one system and another, and you're having to do that by hand. But we can automate that. We can design it in such a way that it's now rolled into something that's part of your solution. You no longer have to do that. So how many hours per week are your people spending on that? And then you're going to come up with a number, because everybody knows what their overhead costs are usually in their business. And that's going to translate into a dollar value of just that one design feature. And then, you know, you can use that to do the math. And I find when customers are really convinced about the value, it's easy for them actually to make the decision to redesign, right? So where they are right now is a painful place, and you can show them how the design can actually not just make their lives easier, but also make them money as well.
Absolutely. So it sounds like an ROI type situation, right?
Yeah.
And Jake, do you?
Yeah, I do. I agree with everything. I have a feeling we're going to be doing a lot of agreeing with each other today. So obviously what she just said is true. What Alexis said is absolutely true. And you know what my approach, what I find the best approach tends to be for me and us at Angel City is coming from a place of empathy and starting with the troops, the people who are using the system the most. Those are the people who, those are the users you need to identify the stories of. Those are the people you need to be able to champion. And those are the interactions you should be counting. I gave a talk at DevCon last year and highlighted a customer success story of ours where we actually went in and literally counted how many times they were tapping their phone screens to you know, accomplish one piece of a process. And we extrapolated it out across all the employees, and then we took it across the month and the year, and we added it all up, and it ended up translating into over 5 full-time, full-salaried employees worth of time over the course of a year.
Wow.
And that was a process that we started from a place of empathy. I want to help the people who are using this thing the most. And it also translated directly to the business owner in terms of dollars and cents. So it was really easy to justify a redesign of that particular part of the process because it's right there in front of you. I mean, if I can save you, it'll cost you X amount, but I can save you this much over time. I think that's a relevant point for most business owners, for most decision makers, and that's been a really successful strategy for me and for Angel City Data.
Henry, you know, your customer base is kind of your clients are kind of a little different, right? You have as a client the entire community, us, and we're fairly vocal. How do you deal with that situation then?
Well, I mean, we're constantly getting feature requests and, things that might be improved for the particular customer situation. But unfortunately, with limited resources, we have to balance what is the best for the community and where we think the community should go. So obviously, it's not just design. Speaking to that, PM and engineering as well, sort of working all together to figure out where we want to go and what we can deliver at what stages.
Yeah.
So I want to sort of circle back a little bit to what both Jake and Alexis had mentioned. I think being able to quantify something, that's such a powerful tool that we all have to make our case. I mean, I think it's a tool to sort of identify what the problem, but it's also a way of justifying, hey, we've done this change. Look at how much of an improvement, as Jake was saying, that this change has made. So it's a quite powerful tool. And I think along the lines of like, how do we make our case for things? I think, and perhaps you had also mentioned this earlier, that people don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps they might not. They're not designers. They don't share the same language you might have. But I think we just need to sort of visualize things so that we can show them perhaps a few key screens that what we are talking about, and so to sort of be able to tell a story around that.
Yeah, and sparking people's imagination is really good too. Right? Like you were just showing them something. Sometimes people will come and they're not really sure. They know they want something different, but they don't know exactly. Maybe they're on the fence a little bit. But if you can inspire them, that's really powerful. And you can show them this is what it could be. You don't need to do the whole entire design. You just need to sort of give them a taste. And people often are very responsive to that. They kind of know it more intuitively when they look at it, and they sometimes clients are very close to their own process, so it's hard for them to envision another way of doing it. So that's kind of our job, is to say, you know what, I can look at your business maybe just from a high level or look at one little portion of it, and I can imagine this other way of doing it. Maybe that would be good for your people, or it would maybe help. It would be easier to train new people that are coming in. That's a big one. Training somebody on a very difficult old system, it's a major headache for some clients that have turnover. Then by the time you train this person, and there's this very specific knowledge, because it's not often those older systems are kind of, they grow sort of, I call it organically, they just kind of like morph into something else over the years, right? So people who are really familiar with it know where to go to do a certain thing, but somebody brand new coming to it has no idea, right? You've got somebody joining your organization, how long is it going to take you to get them on board, right? And that matters more for some businesses than others, but it can help retain people. People are working in that all day long. Like you don't have to torture them with this like interface. Hard to look at, hard to understand. A million clicks to get somewhere.
Yeah, you're describing the software version of the Winchester Mystery House. It's essentially, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that house. It's this crazy old house in California that they kept adding on to for some pretty bizarre reasons. But to add to that, when we're starting, something that's been really helpful for me when I'm walking into an existing customer system, that's always the most challenging thing, right?
Yes.
Starting from the ground up is easy, right? We get to start with all the new tools. We get to start with fresh design. We're not bunkered down with this old. We're not, we don't have that baggage of that old system. But, it's particularly right now during COVID-19, we're seeing a lot of existing customers come to us with, hey, we need to do something about this process. We need to make this more efficient. And one of the things that I've been trying out is adjusting what I'm listening for when I'm listening. And it's easy to hear what someone is, when a client is trying to explain to you what they're doing in the system, it's easy to get caught up in that. I'd like to kind of take it back even further a little bit and go, no, I don't want to know how you're doing it. I want to know what you're doing. I want to know why. I need to know why. I need to know. And again, that's from that empathetic place, right? I don't need to know that you need to push this button 40 times. I can see that. What I need to know is what those 40 times are doing. And that tends to, all of a sudden, I find that when you pay too close attention to how they used to do it, you end up with kind of a similar version of the same thing. Whereas if you aren't weighed down by their description of how to accomplish something in a system, you're you automatically get to play in a brand new space mentally, right? And as a designer, that's important because it is easy to get locked into old, well, this worked, and well, it can work better, So
Yeah.
I think just the point.
You and Alex had also mentioned kind of dance around, right? In situations where you inherit a solution, or it can be, it's happened to me. If you've been in doing this for a while, you come around to a system that you built a while ago, and it absolutely needs some work. But sometimes the customers they're not ready, right? They have some pushback on that. What has worked for you? What are the pushbacks? First, let's talk about what are the pushbacks you hear most often from customers as to like, wait up, hold a second, I don't want to do that. And what's the best way to overcome? What has worked for you?
So budgetary, always. Really, that's going to be your number one. Followed probably shortly thereafter by legacy employees who just like the way it works, right? And they've got Stockholm syndrome. They don't know, they've just been doing it forever, and they're just used to it. And the approach that at least we've taken recently has been, well, especially right now, because everybody's really tight right now. All of our clients are experiencing some setbacks. Most of them, I should say, are experiencing setbacks, and that poses a challenge, particularly when it comes to a redesign. It doesn't appear valuable to most people in times like these. And in all reality, it's a very important time to do things like that, because if I can make, and we don't start with the whole app. Don't think about the whole app. We're not redesigning the whole app. Let's redesign one particular workflow. Let's build iteratively. Let's do one thing at a time. Let's solve small issues that are actually large issues because they occur so many times every single day. But let's do it in a way that the bills that are coming to you aren't going to feel like you're drowning. Right? But we're at the same time, we're solving a really important piece of machinery that's been kind of broken for a long time. So we have a system right now. Actually, in the keynote this morning, Brad had brought up shock therapy. That's one of the clients I've been working with for the last year and a half. They started with us with a template that's relatively old. Right? I think we built it. And by the way, the worst designer is always me, like last year. Like I always think, oh man, what was I doing? And so we built this thing back in, I want to say 2010. And it looked great in 2010. It doesn't now, and we need to work on that. But it serves as a great template for a lot of clients, right? And what we've been doing with them as we're building new workflows, we'll build them with a brand new UI, right? And then they start getting used to, when I go to that part of the system, I really enjoy myself. I feel like I'm in a much nicer car. And then what that's been doing is they go, hey, do you think we could do that same treatment over here? Because we kind of spend a lot of time over there. So rather than approach it from like let's just go ahead and redesign everything, we go, okay, we can maybe pay attention to some small pieces here and there, but let's focus mostly on what workflows do we need to build in here that are going to maximize your staff's productivity.
Absolutely. Alexis, what about you?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say I have a slightly different take because I've been doing some total redesigns, and actually I find it sometimes easier to do a redesign because, well, number one, you have a system that is already functional, so they kind of know what they need to include, right? They know what functionality they want. It's one of the challenges when you're doing something brand new is the client has no idea. They're like, I need to track widgets, right? And you're like, okay, I know it's going to be more complicated than that, right? But when you have an existing solution, you have as an existing feature set, and you can say, okay, we can replicate this, and you make your list and what's MVP going to be. What I find challenging sometimes when you have, and I think, I'm sorry, I'm not disagreeing with the way Jake is doing it. I think that's perfectly valid. I've definitely done that myself. But another option is sometimes it's really hard because of the way the data is structured, especially if it's a legacy system. Sometimes when you try to impose like a new sort of almost a new schema, right? A new mental model for the way the system's going to work. I gave a talk last year about workflow-based design, right? So you're not necessarily going to have a global navigation. You're not going to be able to just like reskin it and then just present a new UI. You're actually rethinking the way the whole thing is going together. So then now you have this old legacy data model and you're trying to put your new ideas onto that. Can sometimes be a little bit challenging. And I really like those redesigns. I've had a couple of them just out of coincidence the last couple of years. And I've been really busy since COVID-19 because what if people want? They want software, right? It's more critical for people to be able to work efficiently from home, and what you could kind of put up with in the office, it was a little inefficient. Now it's like, oh, yeah, I really do need that to work seamlessly. I can't just walk over to my colleague's desk and tell them about something that happened. I need a notification system or whatever it happens to be. So I think both work, and it probably depends on the client. What do they have? How much are they willing to spend? Initially, how valuable is the system to their business? What is their business? Obviously, if they're hard hit, they're going to have less money for development. But if they aren't, then they're going to want to really capitalize on that. So one thing that's really important when you are doing a redesign is to just focus on what we call MVP. I'm sure it's pretty known to most people, is your minimum viable product, right? That goes for the design as well. What will you and will you not include, and be really ruthless, because the sooner you can get that MVP into their hands, the sooner they can start to realize that ROI we were talking about. And then there can be a phase 2. There's always going to be a list of like things that we didn't get in round 1, and we want to do it, but we don't need it for day 1, but we might need it for month 2 or month 3 or whatever that is.
Yeah, that phase roadmap's really important. From a client's mental state, they need to understand what's coming and when, and as long as you kind of break that down for them, hey, in phase 1 we're going to tackle the MVP. There's we know there's a lot to do. Here's how we're planning on doing it. Here's the order of which we're doing it. And then they at least have a timeline in their head of, I know this part of the system's not done yet, but I know it's going to be by, X date or so. So kind of I've been really focused on phasing, because our clients right now are really busy, but they don't have the dollars to spend right now that they did prior to.
When you say phasing, you mean doing it in parts?
I mean
sections,
agile,
right?
yeah. I mean iteratively and as agile as we possibly can. And that's sort of what I mean about redesigning pieces of a system, ultimately with the goal of redesigning the entire thing. But as we work iteratively, we're able to give them a taste, like Alexis said, of what a better design can mean. And I think a lot of people here probably have questions about, how do you sell this? And, I think, at least in my experience, I challenge the business owner to, let me just look into it. Let me just look into it, because if you let me look into it, I promise you, I will find tremendous drags in efficiency. And as long as I can quantify that, once I can quantify that, that translates directly to the business owner or the project champion, whoever it is. So it's justification. We aren't doing this just to do it. Otherwise, as Alexis said, we wouldn't do it. There'd be no point.
And here's a question, and maybe Henry, because you mentioned something about kind of design telling a story. When I approach design, again, it's not my forte. I do it because I kind of have to. But a lot of us struggle with, well, we got to do it. What's our best approach? Do we, as Jake is saying, do I just focus on just one area, making something just look nice, make a little bit better? Or is there an overarching story? Is there something? Is there some approach that I should be looking at to kind of get everything, heading towards the same goal?
Yeah, I think as a designer, we always want to look at the vision. Where's the ultimate goal, and kind of work backwards. But practically, that might not always be the case, especially if you're working with clients with the existing system. Now, I can relate to so much to what both Jake and Alexis are saying. Even though I don't work with clients directly, there's a product called Pro out there that's out there. It's quite big, and I know it's not possible to go in there and blow everything up. So what we try to do is, like Alexis was saying, we prioritize, we focus on certain things. We try to do those things really, really well, without being, I don't want to say hampered, but without considering the existing user experience too much. Like, we don't want to hamper ourselves just because the old way of doing it is the way it is. So I think we should sort of push all the new stuff, and then, when people experience that new experience, I think they'll start asking for, hey, why can't we make the rest of this work and look as the new thing does?
Yeah, in terms of selling design too, I think that there's something to be said about qualifying your customer as well. I think Jake and and Henry have been talking about people who are already kind of ready, and you're kind of bringing them the last step. You have to really sort of be careful. If people really aren't ready and they're counting a lot of resistance, then you have to think, well, maybe this project won't be all that successful. That said, there's always going to be somebody in your user group. I think Jake mentioned this before, the resistant person, right? Somebody who's going to just be resistant. And I've been getting a lot more into change management techniques and researching those and seeing how I can leverage change management to help my design actually be successful. And a lot of that involves what I was just saying, making sure that somebody at the top, the decision maker, really strongly believes in the project. So we talk about doing our ROI, making sure that they understand the value, giving them a clear roadmap so that they know exactly what they're getting and what you're building. Not too detailed, because I don't think you need to do that, but some sort of, groups, lists or whatever, groups, if it's sprints or iterations or whatever you want to do. And then, making sure that that the project has the support from above, and then supporting as much as you can the people who are struggling with change, right? Because this is going to be something different, something new. And then you try and help them as much as you can, and also listen to them. I think it's really important to listen to those, even those old time people who you think are not very technically savvy. Like they're
the most important,
group, right? And you have to see, what are their problems? What are they struggling with? Sometimes you just get people who are just ornery, and it's not you have to change them. And oh well, you just like win some, lose some. But a lot of times there's something sort of at the core of what their struggle is and why they're clinging to some old methods. Either they've had, unreliable system in the past, or, they're just a certain type of thinker or whatever it is. And if you're an important person, that you have to take that person into consideration, just like FileMaker has to kind of itself, as a platform, try and service, new users, people who are sort of like citizen developers, and then also like really advanced developers. So we have the same responsibility to our user group as well, to kind of support all of the people. And that helps to sell design, because, you're not just saying, okay, here you go, have fun. You're really like engaging in a discussion. You're trying to find out who they are, what their problems are in a day, like all that stuff. And that really also gives the client confidence that you're going to be there for them if there are problems. And you're going to be an ongoing source of support, not just, leaving it in their hands.
Absolutely. Follow up, right? Super important. I something reminded me. I've been toying around with, I believe that good leaders build good teams, and they trust those teams. And so one thing that I've been kind of toying around with has been, let's find departmental winners. Let's find people, all I need is one person in each department who really believes in something, because once I have that team on board in terms of what the vision is, that leader's going to listen. Not only can I quantify what I'm able to do for them, but I go, your team is ready, and here's the champions from each department. And the way that we try to do that, like Alexis was saying, and Henry was saying as well, we go, what's the vision? And then we really break it down and we go, what does that mean? What's the why for this particular department, the shipping department, for example, or what's the why for the sales department? And then finding a champion in each of those departments, really connecting with them, listening to their team, and identifying these drags in process, which, by the way, when you get pushback, when we do get pushback, it's important to reiterate that this approach, the approach to not wanting to redesign, is most likely what led to the need for redesign. That kind of attitude, that tends to make bad design decisions. It does. And so while you need to be sensitive to everybody's budget, of course, and you need to listen, you kind of got to try to find a nice way to bring that up because you never know who built it. Sometimes it was the business owner, and that's a really messy thing. So you got to just kind of treat it very, very carefully. But typically, pushback and refusal to redesign, or just not even wanting to look at it, those tend to be sort of red flags when it comes to the original design of a system. You can go, well, that's probably why we are doing that here. So just want to get that in there.
No, absolutely.
I have a question
go
for
ahead.
Alexis and Jake. How much do you bring up the design process with your customer? Because I hear both of you talking about understanding the problem, talking to the right people. Those are all parts of the design process. Do you find that that's an asset when you talk to customers, or is that more of like you get the reaction, whoa, then this is going to be this long drawn out process that I'm only part of?
No, Alexis, if you want to go for it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. All right. No, I try to bring it up early and often. And obviously, I'm a designer. I want to talk about design, right? But I have an awesome boss and an awesome team who support me in that. And we have some world-class developers here, And so what I try to do early in the process of discovery, we all know that discovery leads to good systems. And we try to keep our discovery process as short as it can be, because customers can get really frustrated when you're just talking, and they're not seeing any results. I'm sure every developer in this room right now has experienced that at least once. And so what I find to be helpful is, okay, I'm going to get with a few of the smartest, process developer guys on my team. We're going to talk with the customer. We're going to come away with needs. We're going to go, okay, let's talk about the data. Let's talk about how it needs to flow. I'm going to start thinking of interaction designs. We're going to start whiteboarding. We're going to start getting excited. And at that point, I tend to wrap the client in and I go, hey, I just want you to see this is sort of where we're at. And they start to get excited at that point, because I'm taking pictures of whiteboards and I'm going, what if this did this and this kind of are here? And we're sort of just like back of the napkin, designing. Yeah. And at that point, I ask, is it okay if I spend a few hours coming up with a wireframe so that you really understand how this works? And they typically are. And then once they see the wireframe, some clients are good to go, ready to rip. We trust you on the UI. Some like mockups, and I've gotten my mockup skills down pretty well over the years. And so I can fly through a mockup pretty fast, depending on the system. Once they see a mockup, and you don't need them to do a mockup for the entire screen or the entire system, we tend to try to find the most challenging points of the system or the most important screens to mock up. Once they see that, they go bananas. And they go bananas because it's real now. It's like, this is what it's going to look like. How cool. I had a client last year that I did a mock-up for, and he took it around to his family for Thanksgiving. He was like, look at what the system is going to be like. So, it's
that's never
visual. Well, and we solve a few things there, right? We've identified user experience issues, and when we're preparing for them, we've gently, we've kind of showed the customer, here's the blueprint for your new house. Do you like it? Is the bathroom in the right place? All that stuff. And then we've also gone, and here's the art that we're going to be using to decorate the house with. And it's just that process tends to be, I don't know, a couple of weeks of back and forth, kind of a thing. And I find the customers get really excited at that point.
Yeah, so you bring them into the process, right?
You
as much as you can. Alexis, I see you're kind of.
I basically just agree with everything Jake just said. I think bring them in, absolutely. Because then they'll have a better understanding. Their expectations are more realistic and more reasonable. And there's always going to be bumps along the ways, but then if they understand what's going on, then their bumps are not a problem. They're just problems to be solved, and you solve them. And you need their input a lot, because they're the experts in their business, right? Absolutely. I'm a design expert, but I don't know their business, right? And I want to know what happens when you submit a form. Where does it go? What do you get back? Do you get an email? Do you get a PDF? Like, where does it going? It just goes off into the ether. So I don't know the answers to those questions. So I really need to rely on the clients very frequently, and I like to have somebody it's imperative that you have somebody in the organization that you're working with very consistently and talking with them. If it's a heavy project, you might be talking to them every day or every other day. And answering questions, because as you're developing your stories, so let's say you have a requirement and that there's kind of a feature. What we do is we start to write out, we use a given, when, then format so the user story is sort of your, as a user, I need for whatever reason is, right? So you write the story at a high level, but then when you're actually starting to develop it, you need more specifics, right? So you need to know, how's the list sorted? Like, is there a due date or not a due date? Is somebody assigned to this? Like, all these little sort of nuances, and you need their feedback on those often, right? Because you cannot always there could be several valid ways of doing it, and then you're presenting those valid ways and having them make a decision. But I agree with what Jake said. As soon as their imagination starts to get fired, they start to imagine the possibilities. I've never had somebody take my design to Thanksgiving, but
it was a weird one
around the office and show it to their colleagues and get really excited. Like, I want to use it now. It's like, it's not built yet.
They're trying to click on it. It's just a picture. It's just a picture. Exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was gonna just touch on one thing that Alexis said. I love what she said, because it all comes back to empathy. That's really what we're doing here. We're trying to help people, and that's. If I could sum up design in just like one word, it's empathy. That's what it is. I mean, in terms of UX, right? UI is nice, but empathy is really important in this process. And the worst thing you can do, and I'm guilty of it, we're all guilty of it, is go design in a silo. Don't design alone, unless it's for a project for you. Then that's why I like to involve the customers much as possible, iteratively, right? So.
Now, I wanted to touch on something that's we're running out of time, but I really wanted to, Henry, you brought up today in previous conversations with me as well that design. When we talk about design, most of us immediately go to pretty screens. We think about what's in front of the screen, but in this day and age where apps are going beyond displays, right? We're getting apps are being redefined beyond what we normally understood. How does design come into play when apps are no longer bound to the screen that's in front of us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're all wrestling with that, and I think the definition of what people think about as an app is kind of getting blurred, right? If you're looking at an iOS device, when you can share something between apps, you consider that part of the app, or is that part of the OS making that possibility? But I think in people's minds, they're not siloed in the way they think about it anymore. It's just one device. They want to get their work done on this thing, and they're not so concerned that, not that they're not concerned, but they want to be able to accomplish their tasks, regardless of whether it happens in this one app you're building or elsewhere.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? It's like the problems exist. It's just the solutions change. The solutions to those problems change.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like I'm plugging FileMaker too much, but I think, 19, we brought in the ability to use Siri shortcuts. So you can interact verbally. We were supporting Core ML. That's another way you can sort of bridge the digital with the physical as well. So I think going further in the future, that's all going to accelerate even more with more machine learning and AI. Our apps are just going to do more for us.
Yeah. Ultimately, the design disappears into the background and just lets people get things done.
That's a great way of putting it.
Really nice. Well, I think with that, I want to get enough time to answer some of the questions that the audience have been sending in. And there's a lot of questions. I'm not sure we're going to try to answer as many of them as possible. But actually, Jake, you got one really quickly. A couple of people are asking, what do you use? You mentioned about mockups. What do you use for mockups?
Okay. So if I'm in the wireframe process, I'm just usually drawing on an iPad with an Apple Pencil right there. And then I get that approved, and then I take it. My tool of choice is Sketch. It's by a company called Bohemian Coding. I also use Figma. I also use XD. Sometimes clients like to give me things in XD, and that's fine. So my preferred vehicle is Sketch, but that's just because I've been working with it, I believe, since it came out. I'm really fast in there. I just know all the shortcuts and all that good stuff. So Sketch, I would highly recommend for anybody.
All right. Some people are asking questions about design courses. Is there, and Alexis, start with you. Is there any course that you would recommend?
Let me think.
Go ahead.
FMBug. And so I've been struggling a little bit to figure out what the best way is to deliver this content. And I'm actually planning to start up some courses, because I've discovered over the last few months, I was meeting live with people once a week, just having a get together, people, whatever they wanted to bring, just talk about design, ask questions, whatever they wanted. And I really love that interaction and being able to kind of meet people where they are, and then also understand what they're struggling with. So one of the things about, course material of any kind is like, well, what do you teach? Where do you start? Like, there's so many possible starting points. So I think that there's a lot of room for courses. I believe that if you go to somewhere like Interaction Design Foundation, they're more sort of general UI, UX courses that they're geared towards web development, but a lot of the information, a lot of the principles are universal. It doesn't really matter. It's really, if you're learning about, how people see or psychology, any kind of, rules around, designing UX or UI, those are still the same. So the way that you might implement it may be a little bit different in FileMaker versus the web, but that's a really good resource And I think there's, general Udemy, there's courses and stuff, but I am hoping to do that. So if folks are interested, please contact me through the website, and I'm going to keep them small. And however many people I get, then I'll try to run, those courses with people with their own solutions, bringing them and improving them and trying to see where they're struggling exactly. So then they can get personalized, advice, not just sort of generic advice.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Generic UX advice is pretty difficult. It all comes back down to the person and their problem, right? So, you could, I suppose a good way to look at it would be, how have some designers solved different customer problems before, looking at that process and things like that. Alexis, I didn't know you were going to do some courses. I might participate. That sounds fun. I actually saw a couple questions follow up to the Sketch. It sketches on Mac. At least I'm on Mac. I'm not sure if there's a Windows version. And then somebody had wanted clarification on Adobe XD versus SD. It's actually X, so xylophone D. I just wanted to make sure that got answered.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe Jake, you take this one here just for start. Let's hear some questions here about how do you charge for redesign, right? How do you measure that? And did by time, did by project, clicks? What do you?
So, yeah, I saw a couple questions flying around about that. Yes, we do charge for that process. And the way that we're able to charge for that process is because I can tell a customer 10 or 12 stories of other customers that are backed up with a customer reference sheet that you let this team into your business and they will streamline it. And I can say, here's how I did it before. And I can show a variety of industries. We can tell those stories. Really, we have some of our best systems we have on every device on the hard drive that I own. So I can quickly demo through that. If I can show a customer what I was able to do for someone else, and that almost always translates into, okay, I find that a lot of customers go, well, how long is the discovery going to take? And I go, you know what, let's not go nuts. Give me 8 hours. Can I have 8 hours to spend with somebody on your team? I'll come back to you with some materials, and we might need a couple more hours, but chances are we're going to identify an MVP during that time, as small as that MVP might be. Because remember, small things solve big problems, right? So it is a difficult dance, and it's one that we've had to get better over time. And we used to be bad at it, but we're really good at it now, and we've gotten really good at it as a team. And it's a difficult thing, but it is doable as long as you do need some skin in the game from the customer. Customer has to at least show that this will be important to them. And we've kind of identified different ways to show customers how to understand what's going to be so usable and why it's going to mean something to their users, right? So it's hard, but it's doable.
In the last 30 seconds, Alexis, how do you measure?
Charge for the time. I mean, people often come to me. I'm known for UI design, so people come to me looking usually for some help, and you try to gauge what level of help are they interested in. So like Jake sort of said, sometimes people aren't ready to dive in, and they just want you to look at something very specific, and you try to do that, and you do your best. I think chunking the projects into manageable pieces so that you can estimate that piece. It's no different from estimating development, really. It's just as easy or difficult as the case may be to do that estimation if it's design versus dev, and there's kind of rolled into one, right? Obviously the design is going to lead to dev as well. So yeah, you just do your best to kind of be as specific as you can about what your it's very agile, right? Yeah, with getting too detailed. It's a kind of a tightrope, but like Jim said, you can do it, and if you have the trust, that helps a lot. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, with that, I think it's a great place here to end it. I've had a great conversation with all of you. I really like to thank our panelists and our community for joining us here today. And I really hope that all of you will join us in about 15 minutes for our next panel, Developers Making a Difference. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, the panel. Thank you, community, for joining us here today. And see you next time.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Be good.